This sloppiness, this incompetence, this disrespect for our intelligence agencies and the personnel who work for them is entirely unacceptable. It's an embarrassment.
Outrage from Democratic members of Congress after news broke that a journalist had mistakenly been put on a group text chain with high-level Trump administration officials. That text chain was on a commercial encrypted messaging app called Signal and reportedly discussed details of U.S. attacks on Houthi rebel targets in Yemen earlier this month. Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, says he was invited to the chain by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. The list of officials in that chat included Waltz, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Vice President Vance, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, and others, none of whom appeared to have noticed that Goldberg was added. Hegseth responded to the news yesterday afternoon.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Despite that rebuke from Hegseth, a spokesperson for the National Security Council said the text chain described by Goldberg appeared to be authentic. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying Tuesday in a post on X that no war plans were discussed and no classified material was sent to the thread. Leavitt also said the White House would be looking into how Goldberg's number was added, but that the president continues to have confidence in his national security team. White House reporter Brett Samuels has had a front row seat to this story as it unfolds and joins us now in studio. So there's this Senate Intel Committee hearing today. Just so happened that two members of that text chain were scheduled to be at the hearing. Lucky us.
Good timing.
Let's take a listen to Democratic Senator Ron Wyden.
And I want to make clear that I'm of the view that there ought to be resignations, starting with the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of Defense.
So Wyden wants resignations, but I think the most important question here is, what does President Trump think about all this?
Yeah, ultimately this is going to come down to Trump about whether there will be any real repercussions here. President Trump, in a quick interview with NBC News, voiced confidence in Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor, said that Waltz had, quote, learned a lesson from this, so maybe acknowledging that there was a bit of a misstep here, a bit of wrongdoing here. But what we've heard from President Trump, what I've heard from sources close to the White House, is that there may be some internal backlash, some internal chewing out, but there's no imminent expectation that anybody's going to lose their job over this.
Does Vice President Vance take a hit from all this? I want to play another clip from that Senate Intel Committee hearing today.
And the discussion included the Vice President's private opinion on the wisdom of proposed U.S. strikes in Yemen, correct?
I don't recall.
Vance, quote, I think we are making a mistake. I am not sure the President is aware of how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. There was a strong argument for delaying this a month.
We are making a mistake. The President doesn't understand. Is there a chance that this caused lasting damage to the relationship between the President and Vice President?
Yeah, I think those comments from J.D. Vance are maybe a bit overlooked in all the controversy around this Signal thread. You know, it's maybe the biggest example we've seen to date of daylight between Vance and Trump. Obviously, Trump not a fan of anybody, you know, publicly breaking with him. The two were scheduled to have lunch together on Tuesday, so I'm sure that this came up. You know, again, I don't think there's any sort of concern about immediate backlash to J.D. Vance, but I think certainly this is something that his critics and folks with an eye on 2028 will certainly remember moving forward.
And I want to also ask about Pete Hegseth. He's the one that allegedly shared the sensitive information in that text chain. There's some question as to whether or not it was actually classified. Democratic senators on the committee promising further investigation into that. Is that something that Trump could potentially care about?
Yeah, with Pete Hegseth, it's interesting because, you know, from what I've heard and talking to folks around the White House is Trump and his allies spent so much capital to get Pete Hegseth confirmed. His nomination appeared doomed at one point. They got it back on track. got him across the finish line. So, I would expect President Trump and his team to stand by Pete Hegseth, but certainly this is exactly the kind of seeming lapse in judgment that I think Democrats in particular raised concerns about during his confirmation process, that he didn't have the judgment for this job.
There's also question about how seriously Republicans on Capitol Hill will take this. Senators during the hearing today didn't really want to talk about it, but we have gotten some reaction from Republicans on the Hill. Let's listen.
I think it's inside baseball when moms and dads lie down to sleep at night in camp. This isn't on the list.
I do think it was incredibly sloppy. I think it was a mistake, and I can say for certain they're going to put protocols in place so that doesn't happen again.
What you did see, though, I think, was top-level officials doing their job, doing it well. I think the administration has acknowledged it was a mistake, and they'll tighten up and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Are some Republicans on Capitol Hill that seem to be taking this seriously? Roger Wicker, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, said that he was going to look into this. Do you expect the hearings and a full vetting of how this all played out?
Yeah, I'm not sure we'll get to the level of hearings, since obviously Republicans in charge of the Senate and House would have to call for those and hold those hearings. Certainly, I would expect Democrats to pursue more information. It is notable, I think you heard from Marjorie Taylor Greene, a really close ally of this White House, calling this sloppy. I think a decent number of Republicans are at least willing to admit that it was sloppy, even if they are, sort of spinning this to say, that it didn't affect the actual attacks on the Houthis, didn't affect the actual strikes, that the administration is carrying out its policy effectively. It does seem there is at least an acknowledgement from Republicans that this was not handled properly.
I want to play one more soundbite as we contemplate the significance of all this. John Bolton's the former UN ambassador and Trump's former national security advisor. He weighed in on the issue. Let's listen.
I was without words when I first heard this. Why do you think the government has built up this extraordinarily expensive classified communication system so that senior officials and many others can use it and keep their information private? If we didn't have that and we only had Signal, that'd be one thing. These are not people who don't have access to that. These are the very top people. In fact, what's stunning is that this thing went on for days and not a single member of that group said, maybe we ought to get off Signal.
I wonder if you think if this is something that could actually break through the Washington noise and political back and forth and actually get out to the public to where they say, geez, these are the guys that are running the country?
Yeah, I think it is interesting. It has a potential to, certainly, because these folks were using this app that a lot of people, myself included, are familiar with Signal. They use Signal to message folks. So I think the broad idea of using sort of non-official channels, sending emojis, reacting to these messages certainly breaks through. Whether planning about attacks on Houthi rebels in Yemen, which is maybe not something that a lot of the public is familiar with, whether that turns us into a massive, long-lasting controversy, I'm a little skeptical of that. But certainly in Trump's Washington, there's always another headline right around the corner, it seems.
I want to talk about this meeting that's happening today. Republican leadership, tax committee chairs, several administration officials are going to be meeting with the goal of melding Senate and House budget proposals. There's some huge issues on the table: tax cuts, debt limit, Medicaid spending, border security, national defense. In order to meet the timeline that they want to go with, the Senate would have to vote on all this next week. Is that possible?
Count me as a skeptic. As you said, there's so much to be worked through here. A lot of this is in the fine print. A lot of this is in the technical details. One version, the Senate version, makes these Trump tax cuts that they're trying to renew permanent. The House version does not make them permanent. The House version, as you said, they're looking at cuts to Medicaid. So certainly a lot of differences to be ironed out, a lot of technical details to be ironed out here on, as you said, a really tight deadline if they want to keep this thing on track. So, I think for Republicans, any progress is good progress, but certainly I don't think that they maybe won't hold themselves to that ambitious timeline.
Meanwhile, Democrats are going to be having a boot camp tomorrow, Democrats in the Senate, to discuss their opposition to the reconciliation package and how to attack that. Comes amid deep dissatisfaction among the Democratic base over the handling by Democrats of the Trump administration. Considering that Democrats don't really have any power here in Washington, are they going to be able to live up to the demands of their base? Or is this reconciliation process just going to add to the frustration of Democrats in the base who feel like the party's not really fighting?
Yeah, they are in a really difficult position, and I think you saw that with this fight over government spending a couple weeks ago, where ultimately Democrats went along, voted for this this deal to keep the government open. A lot of Democrats outraged they didn't put up more of a fight. Some Democrats acknowledging that maybe no good would have come from a government shutdown. I think the fact that they're holding this boot camp that you're talking about shows that Democrats maybe realize that they need to fine-tune their message. They need to come up with a coherent strategy so that even if they can't stop the passage of this bill at the end of the day, they have a more cohesive message that that their party can rally behind.
At least some communication between the House and Senate would probably be appropriate on the Democratic side. President Trump's pick to lead the Social Security Administration also appearing in front of a Senate committee today. Frank Bisignano is a Wall Street veteran. He's faced a grilling over DOJ's access to Social Security information.
I'm planning on running the agency, reporting to the president, and I think the president has made it clear that DOJ is there for input, but the agency heads own their decisions.
Keep Musk the hell out of Social Security, please. Totally.
What did you make of that hearing, and did Democrats get any information that would assuage their concerns about that access?
Yeah, I think Democrats are still certainly skeptical of the direction of the Social Security Administration, especially given all the scrutiny it's faced. With these DOJ cuts, there's been a lot of attention, a lot of outrage over some of the proposals of what DOJ is trying to do. There's reports of long waiting times, long waiting lines for folks with questions and issues with Social Security. DOJ wants to make it so that you have to go online to register to work out issues instead of picking up the phone and calling. They've closed various offices, so this is creating a lot of fodder for Democrats to go on the attack, and ultimately Social Security, we know, is one of those third rail issues where both parties try to avoid it. So certainly I think Democrats are happy to see it front and center at a time with Republicans in charge.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Brett Samuels, thanks so much.
Thanks, Drew.
The Trump administration is now looking overseas to help bring down egg prices at your local grocery store. The bird flu outbreak devastating farmers and driving up the cost of eggs up over 65% in the past few months. News Nation's Elizabeth Pran joins us now with the latest.
Egg prices have dropped, but they're still dramatically high for so many consumers across the United States. So the administration is working to combat some of these prices. They're starting to import eggs from Brazil, from Turkey, from South Korea. They have been in talks with other countries as well. So typically, eggs imported such as this from broiler chickens or meat birds would be used as pet food, but now it's being used in different processed goods like cake mixes or salad dressing. So it'll take the strain off fresh eggs hitting the shelves, so hopefully offering you some more of those options. The USDA is also supporting farmers. They're trying to offer new research with bioscience, helping them just fiscally recover from bird flu losses, and then also fund vaccine research. If you look at the price of eggs, I mean, last month we were talking $8.17 as a high for a dozen eggs. This month it's closer to about $5, around $4.90. So the administration is saying, what else can we do? Can we consider changing regulations? So allowing, as I mentioned, more eggs from those broiler chickens, from meat birds to contribute. According to some research, some 360 million eggs are tossed out every year because these eggs are not meeting refrigeration requirements. So the FDA is reviewing this. They say, advocates say this is untapped resource. Then you have food safety experts say, wait a minute, we have to make sure that these are refrigerated. We want to prevent salmonella. Either way you look at it, or scramble it, if you will, egg prices will fluctuate between 15% and 74% until the end of the year. Back to you.
News Nation's Elizabeth Pran, thank you. And that's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.